Our topic today is going to be the distance and midpoint formulas. These are two formulas that you will be required to know in geometry. The first one that we're going to start off with is the distance formula. The distance formula is d equals the square root. And notice how the entire formula is under the square root. That's very, very important. And then it's x sub 2 minus x sub 1 squared plus y sub 2 minus y sub 1 squared. How I remember it is that you're subtracting the two x values, then squaring them, subtracting the two y values, then squaring them, and adding them together. So we're going to take a look at an example. The example that we're going to do is to find the distance between the points 2, -3 and -1, -2. Just like when we were finding the slope between 2 points and we label the x1, y1, x2, y2, we're going to do the same thing here. So I'm going to label the 2 as my first x value. I'm going to label the -3 as my first y value. I'm going to label the -1 as my second x, and I'm going to label the -2 as my second y. So this is going to help us for when we go to plug into the formula. So all we have to do is in place of the x2, we put our x2, which is -1. In place of the x1, we're going to put 2. And then in place of the y2, I come and I see my y2 is -2. And then we're going to have minus y1, which is -3. So once you plug in the values, you should have something that looks like this. Once you have that, what we want to do is work on simplifying. When you're simplifying it by hand, the first thing that you want to look for is whenever you have two negatives together or a negative and a minus. Remember that that makes a positive. So I'm going to rewrite my problem and put a plus sign there. Alright, next what we're going to do is we're just going to simplify what's inside of the parentheses. So -1 minus 2 is going to give us -3. And then -2 plus 3 is going to give us 1. Now what we want to do is we want to square both of the things. So when I have -3 squared, that gives me 9. And when I have 1 squared, that gives me 1. Remember, when you're typing a negative in the calculator, if you're trying to square it, it has to go in parentheses, just like you see I have it written here. The last thing that we need to do is just add the 9 and 1 together, so we get the square root of 10. The square root of 10 is not a perfect square root, so if you type that in your calculator, you will see that it is approximately 3.16, and as we do with everything, I do expect it to be rounded to 2 decimal places. So next we're going to take a look at the midpoint formula. The midpoint formula is literally a formula, so if I give you 2 points like this, it's a formula to find the midpoint or the middle point, so the point that's directly halfway in between. You can see the formula here on the screen. How I remember the formula is that it's the average of the x values and then the average of the y values written as an ordered pair. So we're going to take the two x values, add them up, and then divide by 2. And then we're going to take the two y values, add them up, and then divide by 2. So if we look at this example, we are going to be finding the midpoint of the same points that we were looking at. So I have gone ahead and identified my x1, my y1, my x2, and my y2. And what I would like you to do is to take a moment to plug those into the formula. Alright, so once you plug in all of those values, you have the x1, which is 2, plus the x2, which is -1 divided by 2, and then you have the y1, which is -3, plus the y2, which is -2 divided by 2. You simplify that, -2 plus -1 gives us 2. 2 divided by 2, we can go ahead and simplify, we know that's 1. And then -3 plus -2 gives us -5. Divide that by 2, and then we simplify to get -2 and 1/2. Now, you need to make sure that you go back through, make sure you understand how to use the distance formula and how to use the midpoint formula before you come to class.